What history tell us about Arsenal signing Viktor Gyokeres from Sporting CP as Swedish superstar makes big money transfer? Viktor Gyokeres' move to Arsenal is nearly complete. We look at how previous Arsenal strikers have fared in their debut seasons at the club, as well as how some recent players have performed when moving from Portugal to the Premier League. Will Gyokeres prove to be a star signing for the Gunners? Read on to find out. It's taken many weeks, a strike, and seemingly endless updates on add-on structures, but finally, Viktor Gyokeres is going to be an Arsenal player. The Swedish star is set to move from Portuguese champions Sporting CP after a truly incredible 2 years, where he scored 68 league goals in 66 games, with 97 goals in 102 games across all competitions. Even considering the relatively weaker strength of the Portuguese league, the numbers are still ridiculous. But of course it still begs the question, can they translate to the Premier League? For every Ruud van Nistelrooy or Luis Suarez there's an Alfonso Alves or Mateo Kezman. Portugal to Premier League. Let's take a look at some recent big money strikers who have made the move from the Portuguese league to the Premier League. We've got their league goals in their final season for their Portuguese club and then their league tally in each of their first 2 seasons. Now let's be honest, it's not a good look. Darwin Núñez's form at Benfica has not translated to Liverpool, and he is reportedly going to move to Napoli. Fabio Silva and Islam Slimani were quickly moved out of their clubs, with the latter being a particular worry given he scored a bucketful at Sporting, the club Gyokeres is moving from. However, Raúl Jiménez is really interesting. His numbers actually went up. Now, this is partly down to the fact that in his last 2 seasons with Benfica he was behind Kostas Mitroglou, remember him, and Jonas. However, it is worth pointing out that Jimenez's second season with Wolves, where he scored, Nilsson, is also interesting. His numbers did go down, but going from one of Portugal's big 3 to a mid-table Premier League side is a tough adjustment, and he is showing promise. The 2 other players to consider here are Luis Diaz and Bruno Fernandes, not strikers but very much goalscorers. In Fernandes' last full season at Sporting he scored 20 goals and registered 13 assists. In his first full season at Manchester United, he scored 18 goals and registered 12 assists. There aren't many people who think that move was a mistake. Diaz's move hasn't quite had the same impact, but it is worth pointing out he only got to double digits for league goals in Portugal once. The numbers tell us that signing a player from a smaller league like this is a big gamble. However, we have also never seen a player put up Gyokeres' kind of numbers across multiple seasons, the Arsenal numbers. But what about Arsenal strikers in their debut seasons? Below we have the last 8 strikers Arsenal have signed with the same stats as before. Olivier Giroud and Lucas Podolski both saw their numbers drop, but they were also both playing in the same team, so that can be easily explained, as can Danny Welbeck with his injuries. Alexis Sanchez and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang also both dropped initially, but they did both eventually improve, particularly the longer they stayed. Aubameyang had tremendous second and third seasons, whilst Sanchez exploded in his third. Alexander Lacazette never hit the same heights he did at Lyon, but he was consistent. Then we have the 2 primary striking options signed under manager Mikel Arteta, Gabriel Jesus and Kai Havertz. These 2 are trickier because yes, they did improve compared to their final season at their old clubs. But there are mitigating circumstances, namely that they had fallen out of favor, or were being played not as a striker, before they moved. And even now Havertz just isn't an out-and-out striker. About him. Early last season, after Gyokeres had scored during his team's win over Lille in the Champions League, TNT Sports pundits Rio Ferdinand and Martin Keown discussed him, with the former saying, "I don't know how he was allowed out of England. He's a beast of a human, he's just developed into a really outstanding player, and I'm really interested to see how he develops in the next coming year or 2. Of the goal against Lille, Keown added, "He's turned and spun on that one and put it in the back of the net. Who does that remind you of? Bit of a Erling Haaland about him there." Later in the season, before Sporting's game against then Premier League champions Manchester City, where the Swede scored a hat-trick, Ferdinand was asked about Gyokeres again. "He's been phenomenal. There's a variation in his goals, absolute powerhouse, great attributes. The profile of the player is what you think would be able to work in England. I wouldn't be getting too carried away. I want to see him come and deliver that. We've seen many players who've done well in other leagues that come here in the Premier League and fail to deliver. I'm not saying he'd do that, I'm quite confident he'd deliver, but you need to see him do it. But it's men against boys at times when he plays." Former City defender Joleon Lescott was sitting alongside Ferdinand and added, "The goals are there, that's the important thing to have, but in regard to the leagues you can't compare the league. But if you're scoring in the Champions League consistently, I think that's what his potential will be gauged on. Ultimately, no one can know if Gyokeres will be a success. The data is against him, both in terms of recent performances by Arsenal strikers and recent big money moves from Portugal to England. However, there are a couple of important caveats, such as the sheer number of goals he has put up, as well as Arsenal not having a true number 9. Which way will it go? We can't wait to find out.